another one to try. Always keep on using that same one, but testers aren't doing this. And also, again, test for the potential of denial of service. It is a real bugbear when you can lock out half of your internet banking's accounts. Sorry. Yep. Because if you failed that first question, so what is your cat's name, John, don't give them a new one. Make them re-answer that question until they get it right. A lot of times it's overlooked. So don't go out from the pool. Don't say, right, you've got 10 questions, you failed the first one, well, I'll give you the second one instead and go that way. It's very easy to brute force that. One of the things that I know was talked about earlier was cross-site request forgery. It's a bit boring, to be honest. It's quite easily resolved. What a lot of banking applications are doing now is transaction pins. So when you log into your normal application and you want to transfer money into my account, as soon as you do that click, transfer, you get issued with a transaction pin. The benefit of doing it with this is that it does knock out most excess RF, whatever they've called it this month, things. The other option is, a lot of the times, if they do it over a get thing, it's pretty much game over. If they do it over a post thing, even better. But testers aren't testing for this. There are actually ways to get around this transaction pin. A lot of the time, users are allowed to just pick their own transaction password. So again, it comes into the fact that they will choose very weak password things. And a lot of the banks we've seen don't actually have a password policy that stops this transaction pin from being insecure. So they'll check the user's password against the IT security policy, but they'll forget about the transaction pin. So a lot of the times it's 1 to 8 or 1 to 9, etc. These areas are not being looked at. That's pretty much the authentication. All the other basic tests do apply, but these are the main areas that we've seen haven't been tested. We've tested the past 2 years, probably about 60 to 70 major banks at the moment. And we actually have put research on the Corsair website to detail how many vulnerabilities we're finding. And I'm not just saying stuff out here. We actually are finding a lot of consultancies not finding these bugs. We're finding quite complex bank applications being given the green light to go ahead on the internet. And when we're doing the retest, we're finding 6 vulnerabilities. So there is a method behind my madness. Next section we're going to be looking at is authorization. Okay, there's 2 classes of authorization that should be considered before testing. With most banking applications, you have different users. You have different levels of users. How the developer has decided to work out how that authorization is going to happen varies between different development teams. I've not really seen an approach that works on a global basis yet. Everyone has its pros and merits, etc. So the first level is user-level authorization. So can I see other users' bank accounts? That's pretty much fundamental in any banking application. You don't want to see somebody else's thing. A lot of the times, the checks we found we were doing was a simple hidden form in an HTML field. That's how they were doing authorization. So start checking for this. Start tampering around with the account IDs. Start seeing if you can enumerate other usernames, other account IDs. So in the post request, modify the account there and put another one in. Does it give you a different error? Start playing around with that. This is not being tested. The next level is role-level authorization. A few banking apps actually allow you to log in as a former administrative privilege. And a lot of the times they will do this on a flag basis. One simple flag is administrator, yes. Okay, that's quite a basic example, but that's the gist of things. And again, these are things that are being totally missed. The ability to log in and start adding yourself direct debits or credit, etc. itself. So the test that I expect testers look for is access control is performed in the entire transaction and just not on the start page. You'd be amazed how many applications do this. And you can't bypass the transaction authentication by just simply removing it. This is also a common tactic. It's quite easy. A lot of applications will quite happily work if you just remove the token itself. So, very brief section on authorization. I expect there's not much that hasn't been covered. The section that we have found the most vulnerabilities in, and the area that I find the most interesting for banking and applications, is mathematical operations. How many people here did read the Corsair paper on numerical vulnerabilities that was released? So quite a few of you. There was a bit of a interesting backlash regarding the paper. A few people said that the paper didn't really give us anything new. It was kind of a known thing. And my question is, if it was such a known thing within this industry, why are banking applications and most applications still vulnerable to these type of attacks in 2008? And why aren't testers actually testing for this kind of stuff? So the first set of tests that we start to look at is the currency manipulation tests. I mean, everybody here who's used their online banking obviously can transfer money out and get currency, etc. What we've noticed is that these types of applications are quite vulnerable to tampering with the parameters. So the currency can only be manipulated within the parameters permitted. Another example is between Middle Eastern banks, so Pakistan, India. There are restrictions on where you can and cannot transfer between different currencies. A lot of the times they do this on the UI itself. They're not doing these checks to see, actually, hang on a minute, can I transfer to US dollars from Pakistan? Is that allowed? These checks aren't being picked up. Another function is manipulating the currency yourself. It is quite handy when you want to transfer into another currency and you can decide what kind of value the currency is. The currency displayed, hello, okay. The currency displayed is actually the same as the approver. A lot of the times when, in more complex banking applications, when you click the option to transfer currency, it doesn't happen automatically. It will go to an approver within the bank. There are ways where you can start manipulating that to show the banking approver, look, I actually want to transfer into dollars, but in reality I want more Pakistan rupees or whatever else it is. And also, again, how much can you limit on an account? If you only want $20,000 coming out per day as a hard-coded limit, can you bypass this amount using various mathematical ways to do that? So the tests that we expect to see and that we do at Corsair is manipulation of source and destination account numbers. You'll be amazed at how many times we've actually been able to get other people's banking details using this very, very simple method. It sounds quite absurd in 2008 that you can still log into an application and get this, but it does happen. Enumeration of account numbers. A lot of the times when you put in a different account number, you can start to work out what are valid account numbers and what aren't. This is a great way to then start using this as a further method of attack. And transferring money between legitimate accounts using negative values. A lot of the times, developers don't expect you to put in a negative value for a currency, because why would you? But a lot of the times, it could also crash the application, cause various errors, and also get you where you want to get. The next part of the mathematical thing is actually bypassing validation routines. In this day and age, I have to admit, a lot of applications and developers kind of understand the need for a centralized validation engine. The days of finding cross-site scripting and SQL injection in the more complex applications doesn't really exist. They are quite clued up on coming in, checking inputs, against, etc., bad list or white list, and then going from there. But there actually are ways for testers to go around and get past validation routines. First one is exponential notation. Is anybody here familiar or use these techniques yet? 3, 4, so it's quite handy. This is actually perfect for a tester when testing an application. The basic emphasis is I have a banking application and it will only let me transfer 1,000 US dollars a day. What a lot of the times I would do personally is instead of having more than 1,000, I would put 110E plus 1, which is obviously quite a lot of zeros. And then we'll see if the application will let me go that through. Often in this case, it will happen. A neat little trick that we found out yesterday with my colleague Adam over there is that 9E minus 1 is actually 0. Now, what are the times when you're transferring money, you can't have a 0 balance. And the application will actually check to see if that balance is 0. If you put 9E minus 1, you've effectively bypassed that validation routine. And then obviously, depending on the error or bypassing, you can go from there. In the paper that Adam and everybody else created, there was a section on API abuse. And within Java and C#, there are a whole lot of reserved string words, which can be quite useful to penetration testers out there. These can be used to bypass validation routines and also cause serious data corruption issues. One of the premises for having a bank